Good morning, students. Today we come to the last session of this essay, a dissertation upon roast pig. So we looked at the two parts of the essay. In the first part, we talked about this humorous anecdote, the story of this discovery of roasting pig, and it happens in this Chinese village, and these two characters are to be remembered. One is Bobo and Hoti. And in the last class, we were talking about this preparation of this dish, roasted pig, and why he considered this roasted pig, especially the roasted crackling, as something like principes obscurium, the first food, something like heavenly food. And he talks about the right age, in right age when it is to be roasted. It should be under a moon old, and it shouldn't have this hereditary failing of the first parent who were actually in love with filthiness. And then he talks about this way of roasting a pig, and not to sacrifice all those exterior tegument or the outer skin, and it should be crisp, tony, well washed, and not over roasted. And then he describes this food as the cream and quintessence of the child pig's yet pure food. It is something like ambrosian. And he looks at the way it is being roasted. He says that behold him while he is doing, and how beautifully he revolves around that string, and how beautifully this crackling weeps that pretty eyes, all those radiant jellies out of his out comes his eyeballs. So how beautiful it is. And then he describes the roasted pig in a dish. He says that it is something like a second cradle, and he actually saved this pigs from becoming all those indocile, all those low, and all those glutton, or all those disagreeable animals. So death came with timely care. And then he gives out a comparison between a pineapple, the taste of pineapple, and this roasted pig. And he says that pineapple is great, it is too ravishing for mortal taste, but the problem is that it bites, just like a lover's kiss. This pineapple bite, it wounds, it creates wounds in your lips. So it is something like pleasure bordering on pain, and that is why he prefers this roasted pig when he compares it with pineapple. And he compares it with the nature of mankind too. He says that unlike mankind's nature, mankind who is a kind of a bundle of virtues and vices, here this roasted pig he is good throughout, and especially when it is served on a table, it creates least envy among these people who participate in this dinner. It is least envious of banquets, because everyone will get a good portion of this pig. He is good throughout, and it is all neighbors' fare. So here we stopped the last class. Now we will be discussing the last part of this essay. So now he gives out an account, a personal account from his own life, where he says that he is a person who likes to share all the good things of his life. He says that he freely and ungrudgingly impart a share of the good things of his life. So he loves to share all those good things in his life, though he understands that all those good things are very small in his life, because he had gone through all those tragedies, and good things only make a small part of his life. Even then, he loved to share all those good things with his friends. And he says that he found great pleasure when he gave out his things to other people, especially to his friends. And he says that my friends' pleasures, his relishes and proper satisfaction as in mine own. So when I see them happy, when I see them relishing what I gave them, I find happiness in that. Finding them happy gives me happiness. And he says that he gives out. He gives out many gifts. Of them there are hares, pheasants, partridges, snipes, barn door chickens, capons, plovers, brawn, barrel of oysters. So he distributes all these kind of different kinds of delicacies, food to his freely among his friends. And I dispense, he says that I dispense as freely as I receive them. I receive them from my friends and I freely give them too. I love to taste them as it were upon the tongue of my friend. He says that I would like to judge the taste of these various delicacies by offering them to a friend and asking how they taste. Our mothers usually do that. They don't taste these special dishes they make. They will ask another person to taste that, and from the face of that person, it might be you. Or we will be asked to taste all those delicacies, and from the face itself they will understand the taste of that special dish. And he says that I judge the taste of that delicacies by offering them to a friend. I love to taste them as it were upon the tongue of my friend. So when my friend tastes it, it is something like I am tasting that. And then he says that, but a stop must be put somewhere. There should be a line. There should be a border where I should stop. And where does he stop? He says that the only delicacy he would not offer to a friend and which he would like to taste for himself is roasted pig. He says that it will be something like King Lear would have said. King Lear is the one who gave, as you know, who gave away all his territories, all his estates to his daughters and kept nothing for himself. And at the end, he regrets that decision. Ultimately, he dies a tragic death, having deserted by all these daughters, especially the elder two daughters, to whom he had given everything. So he is very cautious. Charles Lamb is very cautious, just like he do not want to act like King Lear. He does not want to give out everything to his friends. He says that I will not offer this particular dish even to my closest friends. I make my stand upon pig. He says that he would gladly give away all other delicacies, but he draws a line in the case of roasted pig, which he thinks that it must be kept for himself. And he says that giving out this roasted pig even to friends, it is something like an exhibition of ingratitude to the giver of all good flavors. So this giver of all good flavors, it is actually roasted pig. Roasted pig gives out all the best flavors, and it will be ingratitude from my side to give away that best delicacy to a friend. To extra domiciliate, that is to turn out from to turn away somebody from your house, or it is said that send out of your house. So he thinks that it will be ingratitude from my side to give out this particular thing, that is roasted pig, which comes as a blessing to me. He says that a blessing to particularly adapted, predestined, I may say, to my individual palate. So roasted pig is something which is destined for this particular person. എനിക്ക് വേണ്ടി എഴുതിയതാണത്. So it is something like a will of destiny that I should eat that. I should relish this roasted pig. It is only meant for my individual palate. So it is something like a blessing, and it will be ingratitude from my side to give away this giver of all good flavors. And then in the next paragraph, he talks about a particular incident where he gave out one of those wonderful gifts given by this good old aunt, and how he regretted that decision. So here he connects this with this giving out this roasted pig. So his point is that he need not give away all those things, all those good things in his life. He can keep something for himself, and in that he prefers roasted pig. So he remembers, he says that I remember a touch of conscience in this kind at school. When he was in school, there was this particular incident. He had this good old aunt, and who never parted from me at the end of a holiday without stuffing a sweet meat or some nice thing into my pocket. So I used to visit her during these vacations, and when I returned from her home, she used to stuff my pocket with some kind of delicacies. Usually it will be something like sweet meat, and at that time, on one holiday, she gave him a plum cake. He describes it as a smoking plum cake, which is fresh from the oven. It is so hot, it was smoking plum cake. It can even smell this delicious plum cake. And he was on his way to school, and on his way, he says that it was over London Bridge, he saw a old beggar, a grey-headed old beggar. He saluted me, and now when I rethink about that incident, I know that he was a counterfeit, he was a fake person. But then I couldn't understand, I couldn't distinguish him as a fake person. So I had this schoolboy, like he says that it is something like coxcombry of charity. Coxcombry of charity is, which means something like a foolish display of charity. We too do that. When there are people around, we try to help a beggar, because we want to make an impression among our friends that we are very caring. That is known as coxcombry of charity. It is something like usually these schoolboys do, a kind of a display of charity which they don't actually mean. So he was a schoolboy, and he just acted like a very caring person. So he gave this old beggar the whole cake which his good old aunt had presented him when he was returning from her home. And he walked on a little, he went ahead a little, and then he understood what terrible mistake he has done. So he had this proud feeling of it is said that the vanity of self-denial. He had this proud feeling of making a self-sacrifice. But when he went ahead, he understood that it was something very much it was a very foolish thing to do. He walked on a little, buoyed up as one is on such occasions, with a sweet soothing of self-satisfaction. So for some time he felt so happy, he felt so light-hearted, helping a beggar. He felt this self-sacrifice made him feel so proud. But later he says that my better feelings returned and I burst into tears. So his sympathy, seeing this beggar, he had this sympathy, and he had given away this whole cake to him. But soon he realized the loss, and And at that thought of this loss, he burst into tears. So this is something like a psychology of a child. Children used to do that they will share these things with their friends, and after a few minutes, I have seen that actually, after a few minutes they will start crying, they want it back. So here he explains beautifully the psychology of a child. And he says that how ungrateful I had been to my good old aunt. So it was ungrateful from my part to do such an action, to go and give the good gift she gave me to a stranger, to a beggar, to a man whom I had never seen before. And I know that he will be a bad man, an impostor, a counterfeit or a fake person. And then he thought about how will he meet her again. He has this prick of conscience. How he says that how naughty I was to part with her pretty present. That now comes the sweet smell of that spicy cake, which came back to him when he recollected. So it was smoking plum cake fresh from the oven. So now he gets that order of that sweet cake, that spicy cake. And he thinks about the pleasure and the curiosity which this good old aunt might have gone through when she prepared this cake, when she baked this cake. And he thinks how much disappointed this lady will be when she comes to know the truth that I had given away this wonderful cake, this spicy cake, to a beggar. And he says that I blamed my impertinent spirit of alms giving. I blame my rude spirit. It was rude from my part to give out as a charity to a person a cake which my good old aunt made it specially for me. It was rude from my part to part it with such a beautiful cake with an impostor. So he says that I never wish to see the face of that insidious. Insidious is cunning, good for nothing, old grey impostor. So he feels greatly hurt by this loss of the cake, and he never wishes to see the face of that cunning, worthless, old grey headed fellow who pretended to be a beggar. And there ends this personal account. So here he is connecting that incident with the with this idea, with this justification that why he is not giving out all those roasted pig. It is, he says that it is something which is meant only for my palate alone. I don't want to give out everything like what King Lear did. And then in the last paragraphs, he talks about this practice of killing these pigs. So our ancestors had employed different methods of sacrificing these tender victims, that is these pigs. And one of those practices were actually the practice of whipping pigs to death. Practice of whipping pigs to death. And in these primitive times, pigs were killed by whipping before being roasted. So it looked like a very cruel practice. So they were whipped to death, giving out something like a shock. I know that it is a cruel custom. And it is said that it is quite possible that this manner of killing a pig, they believed, our ancestors used to believe that it might improve the taste of the meat. It improved the flavor and taste of its flesh. But he says that, Charles Lamb says that, already this roasted pig, or the flesh of this pig is too tender to, he says that it is internerating and dulcifying, it is softening and sweetening. So whipping this pig to death may according to ancestors, it may soften or sweeten the substance, but Charles Lamb is of the opinion that already this pig flesh is too tender, just like a violet. A violet is a flower. Violet is a flower which is very tender. So it is already tender, and he doesn't understand why it is being whipped to death to make it more tender and delicious. So it is something like, he says that it is something like refining a violet. So this flesh of this young pig is very soft and delicious, and he doesn't understand why should we make it more softer or more delicious. And there was this moral question also attached with it. There was this argument related to that. When he had this argument with this one of his friends, the argument was like this, was the similar argument as you see, that whether this flavor of this pig get an additional flavor if it is whipped to death. So there was this argument where they discussed all these things, and he says that he asks this moral question: is man justified in using that method of putting the animal to death? Is there any kind of justification of this method of killing, of sacrificing these tender victims with this whipping? Whether it add extra taste to these pig's flesh. And he says that, I forget the decision. I don't remember what was the conclusion of that argument. So he stops the discussion there, and in the last paragraph he talks about the preparation of sauce which is to be made to be eaten along with this roasted pig. He says that the sauce, when you talk about the sauce, it should be considered, the sauce of a pig deserves to be considered. It is very important. Like, you need a few breadcrumbs which is done up with a pig's liver and brains. There are people who eat the brains of mutton, of goat. Mutton brain is a delicacy. So here he talks about the pig's liver and brains with a dash of mild sage. Sage is something like herbs you use to add flavor to this dish. So you can use breadcrumbs, and which is done up with pig's liver and brains, which becomes an excellent dish. But he says that two things are to be avoided, completely avoided. One is onions and the other one is garlic. He says that barbecue your whole porks to your palate. Steep them in shallots. You can use the shallots, not the onions. And keep away all those garlic, because using onions and garlic, you are actually poisoning them. It makes them stronger than they are. So according to him, onion and garlic, they are too strong for the tender flesh of a young pig. So he ends like this: but consider he is a weakling of flour. So he is a flour, he is too tender, and don't use all those strong ingredients like onion and garlic. So here ends our essay on dissertation upon roast pig. Hope it is clear. Please read the textbook. So in the first part, it is the history. In the second part, he describes how to roast a pig. And in the third part, he gives out a personal account why he is not giving out this roasted pig as to his friends, and he describes this particular event of giving away his good old aunt had given at some point of time a beautiful or smoking plum cake. And in the last part, he talks about the different methods, especially the method of sacrificing these pigs, that is, the whipping of these pigs to death. And then he comes to this moral question, but he leaves it open ended. And then in the last part, he talks about the preparation of sauce. So here ends our sessions on a dissertation upon roast pig. Please go through the textbook. In the next class, I will give you an assignment, and there will be a critical appreciation of this essay. So thank you, girls. Have a nice day.